to install grounding rods and get your electric grounded in about an hour? If so, stay tuned. Mr. Goody here. I know it's been a while since I've done a video, but I have been doing a lot of projects that's kept me busy. I'm going to be releasing more videos very soon. I've just been doing a lot of projects. In fact, today I'm going to show you one of those projects, and I'm going to attempt to record it, and hopefully everything goes well. We have put in an electric pole here, which was quite the task. So what I'm going to be doing today is I'm going to be installing grounding rods. Now, I'm going to do it myself because I want to save money. And before you do this yourself, you might want to get a licensed electrician. This pole is not hooked up to electricity, by the way, so there's no danger of me getting shocked. So the grounding rods are going to work like this. Every state, every county could be different. So that's why you want to check with your local power company before you even do this. In southern Ohio, you have to have two 8-foot grounding rods, preferably made out of copper, 5/8 the diameter, and they need to be pounded into the ground, and they need to be 6 feet apart from one another, and then they need to have a copper wire, one copper wire that's continuous that connects both grounding rods, and then it's going to go into your sub panel for the ground. You got that, guys? Okay, so as you can see, there's two different tips on these grounding bars here. There are two different tips. You can see how this one is more pointy. That's going to be the one you want to go into the ground. And how this one is flat, that is the one you're going to want to hit on with a sledge hammer. I'm going to be using a 3-pound sledgehammer, and also to adjust to the height so that I'll be able to reach the 8 feet tall, because surprise, I'm not 8 feet tall. I am going to be using the step ladder.
Yeah.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a post hole digger. I'm going to mark off where I'm going to put the first grounding rod. And then I'm going to dig about 8 inches down. The reason being is because in this county, you don't even have to bury them, but you're allowed to. And the reason why I'm going to bury the grounding rod is because when you're out here cutting grass, you could, run over the grounding rod, and that could mess up your lawnmower or tear up the grounding rod, and it could cause big problems. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to take any chance of damaging the grounding rod in the future. So before I even start pushing the grounding rod into the ground, I'm going to make these holes around here, or 8 inches to a foot deep. I'll have plenty of space in a hole, and in the middle of that hole, I'm going to push the grounding rod down in there. Now, stay tuned, because there is supposedly a hack or a trick that you can get these grounding rods in the ground, and I'm actually going to test to see if it works, because most of the time it's going to take a lot of energy, a lot of time, and a lot of patience. But we're going to see if that hack works today. Okay, first, This is 6 feet over, and I'm just gonna go half a foot more, you know, because it doesn't have to be exactly 6 feet. I'm gonna make sure and give it that little bit of extra space, adding that extra 6 inches. All right, now they're about 6.5 feet apart. And first we're gonna try this trick that I read on the internet. The internet, since it's on the internet, it has to be true, right? Not really, but we're gonna give it a try. Okay, so you take the end that's got a point, because that's the end that's gonna go into the ground. The hack is, they say you take some water and you pour it down into the hole as you go, and you keep pulling this rod up and pushing it down really hard. And then you add some more water, then you push it up and down really hard. And they say in a matter of 15 or 20 minutes, instead of hours, that these rods will go into place. We're about to test that out. Okay, so I'm gonna pour some water into the hole. And also it does say on the internet, I almost forgot to mention this, that it just depends on what region you're in of the country, that this may not work, but in a lot of regions it's supposed to work. So I'm going to take the pointy side and push this down. And let the water, there's bubbles coming up, let the water go in there. You can see those bubbles. Look guys, it seems to be working. Look at that, as you can see, it's real time, and I've already got this much. I'm already about halfway, and it's only been about a minute or two. So I'm going to pour some more water down in there. Watch those bubbles happen. Then I'm going to pour this water in, and you'll see the water bubble down in the hole. You let that water go down in there. Take about 30 seconds. Now also, something I forgot to mention, you could run into rocks or roots, and that would be bad. And I'm just working that water down in there. Okay, it looks like the hack works. Normally that would have took a lot longer. So what I'm doing now, I'm making sure that the pointed end is going into the hole. Now some of these poles will be pointed on both ends. If that's the case for you, then it really doesn't matter which end. But with this pole, it's flat on one end so it does matter. And I'm just going to just work it up and down. Work that water in there. Then I'm gonna work the water up, and you'll see those bubbles right there. The bubbles that's going down into the hole. And I'll put that back down in the hole. And as you're going down in there, you can feel if there's any clay, rocks, or roots. Now, if you run into that, you might have to move the pipe over just a little bit and adjust it accordingly, or you might have to dig a new hole. Okay, just keep pushing. And you bring it back up. You let that water go down into the hole. I'm gonna put some water here. My hole's right in the middle. I'm just gonna work that in there. You wanna see this bubble again? Now, anytime you run into a rough patch that's not a rock or roots, you can just use the Sledge Hammer and just tap it lightly to where it goes down about an inch or two and pull it back up so that you can get more water going. And that'll make it even easier. We have reached the point where I'm just going to start hammering this with the Sledge Hammer. This is a 3-pound sledge. You can have a 4 or 7, whatever you want, and just start hammering this down into the ground. Okay, now with a little bit of water and a sledgehammer, we made quick work of these 8 feet grounding rods. Now the next step we're going to need to do, as you can see, this is the utility pole, and I know in a lot of states you have to be 18 inches away. That is roughly about 25 inches away. And that is the first grounding rod. And if you look where the second grounding rod is, you have to be 6 feet away, but I went a little over 6.5 feet away, and it's right here. So this is the first grounding rod, this is the second. And what I'm going to be doing is digging a tiny little trench from one to the other. Now I asked AEP's code enforcement, which that's our electric company here, how deep this has to be. He said just 4 or 5 inches. And I have to leave all of this open until he comes and inspects it. But once he inspects it, I'm going to hammer these farther down into the ground. Then I'm going to cover it with dirt. And then all you'll see is just regular dirt. And then that way when you come out, or when I come out and mow grass, I'll never run over the grounding rods or the grounding wire. Now the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Mattic, and like I said, there's going to be a copper wire that's connected to each of these grounding rods. The copper wire in question, in this area, it's going to be a 6 gauge bare copper wire. And I know in some areas it has to be a 4 gauge, which would make it a bigger gauge. But in my area, we're going to do a 6 gauge. So I'm going to go ahead and dig the shallow trench, and I'm going to leave it open for the inspector. But this is so when it's all done, I can cover it back over, and all this will be underground, and I won't have to worry about it getting ran over or getting ran over with a lawnmower. Okay, so what you want to do, you want to dig a small trench. I originally said a foot. Just dig it roughly 6 or 8 inches if you're allowed to in your county. And that's what I've done here, about 6 to 8 inches. This trench goes from one grounding bar, and it goes 6.5 feet to the other grounding bar, and then it goes over to the telephone pole, where it's going to go into the back of the sub panel. And don't forget, you have to make it one continuous line, so there's no disconnects. And what we're going to be using, we are going to be using 6 gauge copper bare wire. I got this from Lowe's, and it was $26 and some change. I will put a link to it in the video description. You're also going to need these two, since the grounding rods are 5/8, you're going to need 2 5/8 ground rod clamps. They look like this, and some people call them acorn connectors, and they are made where they can be buried underground. These 2 connectors are going to connect the bare copper wire from one grounding rod to the next, and then to the sub panel. Okay, what I'm going to do now, this is how this copper wire comes. It's kind of pointed this way, and it's all just round up, and I'm going to straighten it out. The key here is to make all this in one continuous wire. That way you're going to get the grounding effects from both grounding rods. In fact, you can measure it to see your resistance at the end of this. Now this is probably, I'm just going to guess, this is probably 16 to 18 feet. But I went ahead and got 25 feet of wire, because it's better to have too much than not enough. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to take this connector, I'm going to back out the screw. I'm going to go a little bit lower to about right here, and then I'm going to tighten it up. The reason I'm going to do that is, once it's tightened down, I'll still have this little bit of room to hit down this rod. After it's inspected, I'm going to hit it down to about right here, and then cover it with dirt. So I'm going to take the end of the copper wire. I'm gonna put it right here. I'm gonna let about 2 inches of it hang out. I'm gonna take a 1/2 inch socket and tighten it down. Now you don't have to over tighten it. I don't know the torque specs right off, but I'm just gonna snug it up. And then I'm gonna take the pliers, a pair of pliers, and just bend it upward like this. Just like that. And then this bends down. I'm going to double check to make sure this is tight to the grounding rod. It is. Going down. And that's going to take us to the second grounding rod. On the internet and on YouTube, I've seen a lot of people do the first grounding rod and then not the second. Well, here's how you do the second one. You just make a little bend right here. It's going to look like that, but you're going to want to make it smaller so that it can fit down. You're going to want to make that bend to be able to fit in that acorn nut. So it's going to look something like this. I'm going to push the wire, this wire, about 1/2 inch down. And as you can still see, it's one continuous wire. And again, I'm going to make this where it's about 1/2 inch from the top, so that when it's done being inspected by the electrician, I can pound this into the ground, into this trench, and cover it up. So that is the way I connect it and still make it one continuous wire. That is very important. Then you're going to snug this up. And again, I don't know the torque specs. I just know you snug it up really good. If anyone knows the torque specs, they can put it in the comment section below. I'm gonna get it nice and tight. This is a used sub panel. This is the old grounding wire right here. So what I'm gonna do, you can see that the trench goes on over here to the telephone pole, and the grounding wire is going to go in the back of the sub panel. So I'm going to give it some slack. I'm going to cut off an extra 2 feet for mistakes or whatnot that may be made for it to work into the sub panel. And I'm just going to cut it like that. And you can cut it with a pair of side cutters. And I have about this much wire left that I can save for a different job. So at the end, you're going to see that it comes up to the sub panel. I dug a trench. And once these are pounded in, this wire is going to fit perfectly down into the trench. We connected the copper wire to the first grounding rod. Then we went 6.5 feet up here and we connected it to the first grounding rod. That is how you install grounding rods. And luckily, the hack that they mentioned on the internet worked just fine. Again, it may work in your area, it may not. In my case, it worked. So if this video helps you any, please give it a like, subscribe. If you don't like the way I did it, please tell me what I did wrong, or tell me what I did right in the comment section below. It's getting cold out here, so I'm gonna go. I'll leave a link for everything in the video description, And until next time, I'll see you later.